I've spent most of my adult life working on the ocean, surveying, mapping, fixing things deep underwater that most people don't even know exist. You get used to the silence out there, the pitch-black nights, the cold metal of the railings, against your hand. You learn to respect the sea, but nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what we found 70 miles southeast of Bermuda last November. It was supposed to be a routine assignment. 3 days at sea, a skeleton crew, basics, sonar mapping for a shipping route. The company I contract for had done this a dozen times before. No reason to expect anything unusual. But on the second night at 2:43 a.m., we picked up a visual on a vessel that shouldn't have been there. No registration, no radar ID, and when we hailed it on all channels, there was only static. That's when everything started to unravel. 1 second, the radar was clear, just the low, familiar hum of the Atlantic below us. The next, the deck lights caught something cutting through the mist, just off the port bow. A silhouette, tall sails, even though there was no wind. That night, no engine noise, just drifting. We slowed down. I stepped out onto the observation deck with a pair of binoculars. Through the fog, I could make out a hull covered in sea growth. Wood, not steel. Looked centuries old. And yet it moved almost gracefully, like it was being pulled along by something beneath the surface. "Looks like a damn ghost ship," one of the deckhands muttered behind me. We all laughed a little, nervously. It wasn't until we tried to make contact that the mood shifted. No name on the bow. No lights, no crew visible on deck. We circled it once, maybe 200 yards out. The sonar pinged back distorted images. Something about its underbelly wasn't right. It was too deep, like it extended further than the size of the hull suggested. "Captain, Walsh decided we should board it. Protocol. If a vessel's found adrift without crew, maritime law says we report, inspect, and log everything. Normally we'd wait for the Coast Guard, but we were too far out, no signal. So we launched the dinghy. I went with 2 others, Tom, our systems guy, and Desai, a former Navy engineer. All tough guys. I remember thinking, at least I'm not going over there alone. The water around the ghost ship was oddly still. Even as we got close, there was no splash, no wave. Nothing to show we were in motion. Just this endless, suffocating quiet. Even the seagulls were gone. When we tied off and climbed aboard, the wood under our boots felt wrong. Damp, but not slippery. It didn't creak, it didn't sway. I looked down at the planks and noticed something subtle. Every board was identical in size and grain, as if they'd all been cut from the same piece of timber. That's when I started to feel it. The first tug of something deep in my gut. Instinct, maybe, or memory. Like I had been here before in some nightmare I forgot the moment I woke. We called out. "Anyone aboard?" Only silence. No answer, no movement. But then Desai pointed toward the mast. There was a figure, not moving, not reacting, just standing there, barefoot, drenched, facing away from us. We froze. I opened my mouth to speak again, but something in me said don't. Just don't. The fog around the ship got thicker, and then we heard it. 3 knocks, slow, deliberate, coming from inside the hull, directly beneath us. The sound, 3 distinct knocks, echoed through the deck like it came from the belly of something alive. Deep, hollow, ancient. Desai gripped his flashlight tighter. Tom whispered, "What the hell was that?" But no one answered. I think we all knew something was off in a way logic couldn't fix. We moved toward the main hatch just beneath the mast. The figure we saw earlier was gone. No sound of footsteps, no splash overboard, just gone. Fog swallowed everything outside 5 feet. The hatch opened with a low groan. The hinges didn't protest much, too smooth like they'd been used recently. That alone was wrong. This thing looked like it hadn't seen life in centuries. As I stepped below deck, the temperature dropped, instantly, like walking into a walk-in freezer. Our breath turned to mist, even though it was early fall and the ocean air outside had been mild. The flashlight beams barely pierced the dark. We walked through narrow halls that seemed too long for the ship's size. The dimensions didn't add up. I counted our steps once, 12 down a corridor that from the outside couldn't be more than 8 feet long. Desai noticed it too. He said nothing, just kept walking. Then we saw the first room, a crew's quarters it looked like, bunk beds carved from rotting wood. Old naval uniforms, British style, maybe 18th century, hung neatly from hooks. But the weird part? They weren't dusty, no cobwebs, just damp, like someone had taken them off moments ago after being drenched in seawater. There was a table in the middle, a deck of cards spread out for a game, 4 chairs, 3 pushed in, 1 slightly out. Tom reached for the cards. They crumbled to ash. He jerked his hand back, whispering a curse. I noticed something on the floor behind the table, a pair of boots, just boots, positioned as if someone had been sitting there but no one was inside them. They were dry, bone dry. Desai tapped me on the shoulder and motioned toward the far end of the room. A mirror, cracked at the corners, hung crookedly. I lifted my light to it and froze. It showed all 3 of us. But there was a 4th figure behind us in the reflection. Still, pale, smiling. I turned around fast. Nothing. No one. But when I turned back to the mirror, it was empty. No reflections at all, just black glass. Tom said shakily, "Guys, I don't think this place is abandoned," Desai replied, voice low. "I don't think it was ever meant to be found." Then, again, the sound. 3. Knocks, but this time they came from behind the wall, from inside the mirror. We backed away from the mirror, not saying anything. You know that kind of fear where your brain wants to scream but your body refuses to move? That was us. Desai was the first to break the silence. "We're leaving," he said firmly, voice clipped. "Now." Tom didn't argue. Neither did I. But the hallway wasn't the same as before. We turned back toward the corridor we came from, and it wasn't there. In its place, another hallway stretched out, longer, darker. The air changed, too, heavier, like we were underwater. No, no, no," I mumbled. "We turned left. This should be—" Tom interrupted. "Guys, look." We followed his flashlight. Beam. At the end of the hallway, standing perfectly still, was a man, or what looked like one. He wore the same naval uniform we saw hanging in the bunks. His skin was grey, almost waxy. His eyes were black, like pits carved into stone. And his mouth? It was twisted in a grin that didn't reach his eyes. The worst part, he wasn't blinking. Desai raised his light. The figure didn't flinch. Then he began to walk, slowly, silently toward us. None of us screamed. None of us ran. We just stood there like prey that already knew it was too late. But as he got closer, 5 steps away, he vanished. Not like he turned a corner. Not like he melted into mist. He just blinked out. Silence again. Then came the laughter. It was faint, childlike almost, and it echoed from inside the walls. We bolted, took the next door we saw, flung it open, and slammed it, shut behind us. It was some kind of chart room. Old maps were pinned to the walls. One of them looked familiar. It was a map of the North Atlantic. But our boat, our actual boat, was drawn onto it, circled in red ink. Tom leaned in. This is today's date," he whispered, pointing to a scribble in the margin. We all looked at each other. That was when I noticed something about Desai. He was sweating profusely, and his eyes, they looked glassy, unfocused, like he was somewhere else. "Desai?" I asked. "Hey man, you good?" He didn't respond. Then slowly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out something none of us recognized, a rusted brass compass. But I swear to God we never saw it before, and it was spinning like crazy. "Where did you get that?" Tom asked. Desai blinked, like waking from a dream. "I don't know. It was in my hand when we came in." The compass needle stopped, pointing toward the door we just came through. Then, from behind that door, we heard footsteps. Heavy, slow, dragging, and breathing. Something was coming for us. The footsteps got louder, closer. We didn't have much time. Desai's eyes were still glazed over, but he snapped back as Tom grabbed the compass from his hand. The needle spun wildly before locking dead on toward the door. "We have to get out." "Of here now," Tom said, voice low and urgent. I grabbed the nearest map and ripped it down, stuffing it into my backpack. My hands trembled, heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Behind the door, the sound shifted. The breathing, heavy and wet, was now accompanied by a low growl. Something big, something not quite human. We moved together, desperate and silent, inching toward the exit. The door creaked open slowly, as if inviting something inside. For a split second, I froze, expecting to see a monster waiting. But there was nothing, just empty hallway. We bolted. The air felt colder, biting through, our jackets like icy fingers. I glanced back once, nothing but shadows stretching behind us. We turned a corner and ran into a narrow stairwell. The metal steps groaned under our weight, each echo hammering in my ears. I was sure the thing was close behind. Suddenly, a piercing screech echoed through the ship, a high, horrible wail that rattled the walls and sent chills down my spine. It wasn't natural. I looked at Tom. His face was pale. We need to keep moving. We ascended, hoping to find a way out on the upper decks. The stairwell opened into a cramped cabin, but something was wrong. The room was in disarray, papers torn, furniture overturned, and there, on the wall, hung a portrait. It was the same man from before, the one with black, hollow eyes. But now the eyes seemed to follow me. My breath hitched. Then I noticed the frame. The picture was crooked again. I reached out to straighten it. As I touched the glass, a cold sensation shot through my fingers. The air shifted. Behind me, the door slammed shut. We were trapped. Suddenly, the lights flickered violently. Shadows danced on the walls, and a voice, soft, whispering, filled the room. "Why do you run?" It wasn't a question. It was a challenge. My skin crawled. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my shaking hands. Tom searched for the door handle. Locked. Desai whispered, "We're part of the ship now." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. That's when the growl returned, low guttural right behind us. We spun around, but the room was empty, or so it seemed. The air was thick with fear. The walls seemed to close in on us, the shadows stretching longer, darker. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. Tom was frantically trying to unlock the door, his fingers slipping on the cold metal handle. Desai stood frozen, eyes darting around like he was seeing things we couldn't. Then it happened. A sudden sharp click echoed through the cabin. The door was unlocked. We didn't hesitate. We burst out, racing down the narrow corridors, but the ship was no longer the same. The familiar hallways twisted and warped. Doors led to nowhere. Stairs spiraled endlessly upward. Every turn we took seemed to bring us back to the same place. A corridor lined with cracked mirrors. I stopped dead in my tracks. My reflection was wrong. It wasn't me. The face staring back was pale, gaunt, with eyes sunken deep into hollow sockets. The reflection smiled, a slow, sinister smile. I slammed my fist against the mirror. Cracks spiderwebbed across the glass, but the face remained, mocking me. "We have to keep moving," Tom urged, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. Behind me, I heard the faint sound of footsteps, soft, dragging but fast. Desai was nowhere to be seen. "Desai," I called out, but my voice sounded distant, muffled. Suddenly, a cold breeze blew through the corridor, carrying a faint, metallic scent, like rusted iron. Then I saw it, a small smear of dark red on the floor, dried blood. It led down the hall and vanished behind a door that shouldn't have been there before. I hesitated, but fear pushed me forward. I reached for the handle, feeling it was ice cold. I turned it slowly. Inside was a small cabin, lit by flickering lanterns. On a dusty table lay an old journal, its pages yellowed and brittle. I opened it, heart pounding, the foe. Handwriting was shaky, frantic. Entries spoke of a cursed voyage, of a crew haunted by ghosts, of a captain doomed to sail forever. And then a final line, scrawled in large letters. "We are lost. The ship is alive. It will never let us leave." Sudden noise made me jump. Behind me, the door slammed shut again. I was alone, or so I thought. The door slammed shut behind me with a finality that made my blood run cold. I tried the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Panic gripped me like a vice. I was trapped inside this cursed cabin, alone with that eerie journal and the dark secrets it held. I sank to the floor, clutching the book as if it were my only lifeline. The lantern flickered, casting shifting shadows on the walls, shadows that seemed to move on their own, twisting into shapes that made my skin crawl. That's when I heard it, a faint whispering voice. So soft I thought I imagined it. Leave, or join us. Goosebumps prickled up my arms as the voice grew louder, echoing off the walls. I pressed my hands against my ears, trying to block it out, but it burrowed into my mind, dragging up. Images of ghostly sailors, hollow-eyed, condemned to forever roam the seas aboard the Flying Dutchman. The temperature dropped sharply. My breath turned visible in the stale air. I could feel a presence, cold and heavy, pressing down on my chest. Suddenly the mirror cracked again, this time from within the glass. And the reflection wasn't just a reflection anymore. It stepped out. A pale figure in a soaked captain's coat, eyes hollow, mouth twisted in a grim, eternal scream. I scrambled backward, heart hammering, as the apparition advanced. My legs hit the table. The journal fell open to a page I hadn't seen before. It was a map, crudely drawn, showing the Atlantic with a series of strange symbols, markers where the Flying Dutchman had appeared over centuries, always bringing misfortune. I knew then that the ship wasn't just a ghost story, it was a prison. And anyone who boarded, anyone who tried to leave, became part of the curse. The captain raised his hand, reaching for me. I closed my eyes, bracing for the end. But then, silence. When I opened my eyes, the cabin was empty. The door creaked open, slowly, revealing the ship's deck bathed in moonlight. I ran. Back to the boat where Tom waited, stunned but safe. We left the Flying Dutchman behind, disappearing into the fog as the ghost ship vanished without a trace. But sometimes, late at night, I hear a faint rattle on the deck, a whisper carried on the wind. And I wonder, am I really free? Or did the ship claim a part of me that will haunt the seas forever? I'm not the kind of person who believes in ghost ships, cursed waters, or old sailor superstitions. I've been in the maritime industry for almost 20 years, mostly transport, a little salvage, and I've seen all kinds of weird stuff at sea. But nothing, and I mean nothing, has ever haunted me like what I experienced with the Mary Celeste. This all started when I joined a small, privately funded expedition that aimed to recreate the original journey of the Mary Celeste, from New York to Genoa. It was a kind of commemorative voyage, part tribute, part investigation. I was the ship's engineer. There were 5 of us total, all experienced, all skeptical. The ship we used was a near-exact replica, down to the creaky wood, oil, lamps and outdated cabins, the kind of place that whispers when it's quiet. And on the Atlantic, it's always too quiet. We boarded the Mary Celeste just after noon. The Atlantic was eerily calm, like a sheet of grey glass, with a sky that looked like it had been smudged out by ash. The air was heavy with salt, and something else I couldn't quite place. Something old like rotting paper left in a damp basement. I was the first one to step onto the deck. The wood creaked beneath my boots, but other than that, the ship made no sound. No birds, no wind in the sails, just a deep, stifling silence. The sails were partially set, swaying slightly, like they were still catching wind from another time. "Captain," I called out instinctively, though I already knew there'd be no answer. We moved in groups, standard protocol. I stuck with our engineer, Marcus. He was a quiet guy, didn't spook easy, but even he looked uneasy. We found food still laid out in the galley, half-eaten bread, a bottle of wine uncorked but untouched. 1 cup was knocked over. The wine dried into a dark red smear that reminded me too much of blood. "Looks like they left in a hurry," Marcus muttered. But here's the thing, there were no signs of a struggle. No overturned chairs, no broken glass. Everything was just paused, like a movie set after the director yelled, "Cut!" Except no one ever came back. Below deck, it got worse. The air was thick, like breathing through a wet rag. The temperature dropped, which didn't make any sense. We'd been in the sun minutes ago. I remember brushing past a mirror in what looked like the captain's quarters and catching a glimpse of someone standing behind me. I spun around. Nothing. The hallway was empty, but my reflection, it lingered a beat too long. It was still. Looking at me when I turned my back, I shook it off. Had to. The mind plays tricks in places like this, isolated, disconnected from the world. But then I noticed something else, tiny details that kept stacking up. A compass that spun slowly in place, a journal open on the desk, the ink smudged like someone had just finished writing, a child's shoe, just one, by a locked door. Asked Marcus if he heard anything, any voices, movement, anything at all. He said no, but his eyes were darting, pupils wide. He was sweating even in the cold. We regrouped with the others and decided to power up a backup radio to report the status. That's when we heard it, a soft tapping, like fingernails on wood, 3 knocks. Slow, deliberate. We froze. It was coming. From the cargo hold. Nobody wanted to go down there, but we were trained for this, so we did. One by one we descended into the dark, and the knocking stopped. But the smell, God, the smell, hit us like a wave. And then we saw the writing. Scratched. Into the inside of the hold, barely legible under the grime. Don't look at the mirror. We stood frozen in the hold, our flashlights trembling ever so slightly in our hands. The message, "Don't look at the mirror," was scratched in uneven, desperate lines, as if done with fingernails or the edge of a rusted blade. I remember the way the letters dipped and dug deep into the wood, like whoever wrote them was more afraid of not getting them out in time than anything else. Did this ship even have mirrors in the hold? Someone behind me whispered. We all exchanged glances. No one answered. I scanned the area. The cargo hold was nearly empty. Just a few barrels, some old crates stamped with faded letters, and a strange metallic trunk in the far corner. It didn't look like it belonged to the original inventory. It was newer, shiny but scuffed up like it had been dragged. Marcus took a step toward it. I almost told him to stop, but the words caught in my throat. He knelt beside it and ran his hand along the edge. It's locked. Leave it, I said, louder than I intended. Let's finish the sweep. But he didn't move. Instead, he looked past me towards something over my shoulder. His eyes went wide, his mouth opened slightly, like he was going to say something. Then he bolted, straight past me, up the stairs, nearly tripping on the last step. I spun around, but nothing was there, or at least I thought nothing was there. That's when I noticed it. The temperature dropped again, this time sharply. I could see my breath curl in front of me, a faint mist in the beam of my flashlight, and the air, something in it had changed. It was like the smell of something burned and buried, like singed hair and wet soil. I motioned for the rest of the team to head back up. We weren't prepared for this, not psychologically, not spiritually even. Whatever was here didn't belong to our world. As I climbed the steps, I glanced back one last time. The metal trunk was open. No one had touched it. And inside was a mirror. It looked ancient, warped glass in a gilded frame. And I swear, as I met its surface for a split second, I saw someone else's face. A woman, eyes black as coal, lips barely moving as if whispering something inside the glass. I staggered back, nearly slipping on the slick wood. No one else saw it. Or if they did, they weren't admitting it. Back on the main deck, Marcus was sitting against the mast, muttering to himself. I couldn't make out what he was saying. I only caught one phrase, over and over again. She's watching through the glass and she never left. We tried to get him to his feet. He wouldn't move. Then the ship shuddered, just once. A violent lurch, like something had grabbed it from beneath. We all looked at each other, and then to the mirror now being carried. Up the stairs. None of us brought it. No one had touched it. But there it was, standing in the doorway, facing us. None of us said a word. We just stood there, staring at the mirror in the doorway, tall, old, and out of place. It hadn't been there a second ago. The frame was etched with strange patterns, some of them almost resembling runes or symbols I couldn't begin to understand. The glass itself wasn't reflective anymore. It shimmered with a dark sheen like oil floating on water in a dying light. I swear it leaned slightly forward, like it was trying to observe us. No one moved. No one breathed. Then the ship groaned, again deep and guttural like a beast turning over in its sleep. The deck creaked under our boots. A gust of cold wind tore across the railings, even though the sea was calm just minutes ago. I looked up. Clouds had gathered thick above us, black and low. The sky had turned sickly green at the edges like a bruise. I stepped forward against every instinct screaming inside my head and pulled the tarp off the mirror's surface. That's when the glass came alive. It didn't shatter. It didn't crack. It rippled like the surface of a pond after a stone is dropped, and then it showed me something. Not my reflection, not the deck, not the sky. It showed the interior of a room I'd never seen before, small, windowless, lit only by a flickering overhead bulb. In the middle of it stood a girl in a long dress, soaked through like she had just come from the ocean. Her head was bowed. Her hair clung to her face. And then, slowly, she looked up. Her eyes were missing. Just hollow, black sockets. And yet, I felt her looking directly at me. I stumbled backward, hitting the rail. "Did you see that?" I gasped. But everyone else was already backing away from the mirror. Some of them were mumbling prayers. One guy, Jeremy, was openly crying. That's when Marcus started screaming again. Not words, just this awful guttural wail like something was being ripped out of him. He lunged toward the mirror, arms outstretched like he wanted to embrace. We tackled him. It took 3 of us to hold him down. He fought like a man possessed. Eyes rolled back, mouth foaming. I could feel something wrong pulsing under his skin, like his whole body was vibrating with something else. We tied him down and locked him in the captain's cabin. It was all we could think to do. That night, none of us slept. We stood watch in shifts, checking the hallway where the mirror now sat upright at the far end, like it had always belonged there. At exactly 3:03 a.m., we heard a knock on the door of the cabin Marcus was in. 3 knocks, even though we had tied him down, even though no one was near that room. And when we rushed to check, we found the door wide open. Marcus was gone. But the mirror now showed. All of us standing around it. Only in the reflection we were smiling, and none of us were blinking. I wanted to believe the mirror was playing tricks, that the stress, the isolation, maybe even some chemical leak was messing with our heads. But there was no denying it anymore. Something was using the mirror. We stared at the reflection, our own faces unmoving, smiling, lifeless, until Kyle whispered, "That's not us." And he was right, because in the reflection I saw something impossible. I had a cut on my cheek that didn't exist. Scott was missing his left eye, and Kyle, his reflection kept twitching, like it was caught on a loop, flickering between expressions. Stepped away from the mirror, so did the reflection. Only not right away. There was a delay, half a second, but it was enough to make my stomach drop. That's when the air got thicker, like walking into a hot attic. The smell of salt and mildew filled the deck, and just under that, a faint coppery scent. Blood. We went to check the captain's cabin again. Maybe Marcus had come back, maybe he was hiding somewhere. The room was empty, but carved into the wood floor, over and over again, was one word. Come. The letters had been scratched deep, some still fresh and bleeding into the wood. Dozens of them, some upside down, some backwards, all pointed toward the hallway, toward the mirror. Scott lost it. He grabbed a fire axe from the wall and stormed down the hall. "I'm ending this," he said. We screamed at him to stop, but he didn't even turn. He raised the axe. The mirror changed. The reflection warped into a swirl of shadows and light, almost like a storm trapped inside glass. A hand shot out, not a human one, thin, clawed, wet, glistening like something born from the deep. It grabbed Scott's wrist before he could swing. He didn't even scream. He froze, standing there, eyes wide, mouth open, and then slowly, impossibly, the mirror pulled him in. Glass doesn't bend, doesn't ripple, but this thing swallowed him like liquid. The axe dropped to the floor with a heavy clang. Then silence. The mirror was just a mirror again. Only now Scott was in the reflection. Smiling, We were 5 before, now we were 4, and the reflection still 5. After Scott was taken, no one spoke for what felt like an hour. The only sound was the low creak of the ship as it drifted aimlessly in the Atlantic. That, and our breathing, shaky, uneven, and too loud in the heavy stillness. Kyle finally whispered, "It's feeding on us." I didn't want to believe him, but he wasn't wrong. This thing, whatever it was, wasn't just haunting us. It was learning us, using us. One by one, it was replacing us. I looked at the mirror again. Scott was still. There, his image, standing still, grinning, and behind him? I leaned closer. A dark shape stood just out of focus. Thin, tall, hunched, watching. Its head tilted sideways like it was trying to understand me. And then I felt it, a cold breath on the back of my neck. I turned around. No one. But Kyle and Lindsay. Saw my face drain of color. "We have to destroy that mirror," Lindsay said, her voice trembling. "Right now." But Kyle shook his head. "It's not the mirror. It's the ship." He walked back to the captain's cabin. We followed hesitantly. That's when he showed us the logbook. The last few pages weren't in the captain's handwriting. They were erratic, desperate, scrawled in red ink that looked darker than normal, more like blood. The entries were dated 10 days after the ship had been found adrift in 1872, which didn't make sense. The Mary Celeste was discovered completely empty, and the crew had never been found, but the log kept going. The mirror speaks. It shows what we want, but then it takes it back. Each face I see smiles wider than the last. I cannot. "Leave, we are not sailing, we are floating between." "The sea knows, the ship obeys." Lindsay dropped the book. This can't be real. It's a hoax. It has to be." Kyle looked her dead in the eyes. "Tell me you haven't heard the scratching at night. Tell me you haven't smelled the rot." She didn't answer. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the floorboards made my heart race. I locked the cabin door, drew the curtains, turned on every light. But just past midnight, I noticed it again. That smell. Salt. Blood. And something. Older. Wetter. And then, the sound from beneath the floorboards. Thump. Thump. Drag. Like something wet was crawling through the belly of the ship. When I leaned down, pressing my ear to the floor, I could hear it breathing. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there, back against the cabin wall, staring at the door, listening, breathing shallowly so I could hear if it came back. But it didn't. Not physically. When morning came, or at least when the sky turned, that dull, overcast grey, I stepped out into the hallway. The ship felt different, quieter. The air had a stillness that felt intentional. I found Lindsay in the galley, sitting alone at the table, staring at a piece of broken glass. Not just any glass. The mirror was shattered. "Where's Kyle?" I asked. She didn't answer, just kept looking at the shard in her hand like she was waiting for it to speak to her. I tried again. "Lindsay." Still nothing. So I did the only thing I could. I followed the trail. The hallway leading back to the captain's cabin was lined with wet footprints. Bare, human, but wrong. The toes too long. The arches curved strange like they hadn't walked. Upright in years. The door to the cabin creaked open with just a nudge. Inside was Kyle, or what looked like Kyle. He was standing in front of where the mirror had been. Except now there was nothing there, just a dark, gaping outline on the wall as if the mirror had burned itself into the wood. Kyle turned to me slowly, his face unreadable. "I understand now," he said softly. "It doesn't want to hurt us, it wants to remember us." "What the hell are you talking about?" I asked, backing away. He smiled, but it wasn't his smile. Not quite. The sea forgets everything eventually. The Mary Celeste, she remembers. That's when I noticed his reflection wasn't following his movements. It lagged behind, then smiled wider and wider, until it was just teeth, and then it walked away from the mirror, even though Kyle hadn't moved. I ran. Back down the hall, past the galley. Lindsay was gone. Her shard of glass still sat on the table, slick with a fresh smear of red. I don't remember making it to the upper deck. I just remember the cold hitting my face like a slap and the ocean stretching out forever. The ship was dead in the water. No sign of the rescue vessel that brought us here. No working radio, no land, just fog. And in that moment I understood something horrifying. We hadn't boarded the Mary Celeste. We'd never left it. Somehow, when we stepped onto her, she folded. Time around us, digested us, replaced us with echoes, and now I'm the only one left. But I can feel it. My reflection watches me more than I watch it. I haven't seen the others in days. I think I'm next. If you find this recording, if anyone ever hears this, do not go looking for the Mary Celeste. She doesn't want to be found, she wants to be remembered. I don't remember how I got back. They said they found me floating in a lifeboat, half-starved, half-mad, somewhere off the coast of Newfoundland. No sign of the Mary Celeste, no sign of Lindsay or Kyle. Just me, and a small, broken piece of mirror I'd apparently clutched so tightly it cut into my palm. The Coast Guard asked questions, of course. I told them what I could. But every time I spoke the name Mary Celeste, the words came out dry and foreign, like I was choking on them. They ruled it an episode of isolation psychosis, claimed I'd hallucinated everything, that the ship I claimed to board had been lost for over a century. I stopped trying to convince anyone otherwise. Eventually, they let me go. I moved inland as far from the ocean as I could, rented a small apartment in Denver, took a job sorting boxes in the back of a warehouse. Quiet life, routine, forgettable. But I never hung mirrors, not anymore. Still, you can't avoid reflections forever. They sneak up on you, on the glass of a bus window, the dark screen of your phone, the polished surface of a coffee machine. And sometimes I see things. He looks like me. Same face, same body. But his eyes, they're too still, too flat, like pond water that's been dead for days. One night, brushing my teeth, I looked up and saw him again. Except this time he didn't copy me. He smiled. I didn't. I smashed the mirror that night, but it didn't stop. Every reflection now feels like a window I forgot to close, like if I look too long, something will look back and step through. Last week I caught a glimpse of my own reflection, standing behind me in the TV screen, except the TV was off, and I was the only one in the room. I didn't sleep that night. And now I think it's not just watching. It's waiting. The Mary Celeste. She didn't want to kill us. She wanted to continue, to live again through us, through the faces we wear, through the glass we look into. And every time I pass a mirror now, I wonder, is that really me? Or is it the, see, finally remembering me?